My name is Emma, 35 years old, a family court judge in the state of Oregon. That night, my younger sister Vanessa's engagement party. I sat there, like a statue in the middle of a crowded living room, as her icy laughter rang through the entire house. "This is my sister Emma," Vanessa said, raising her champagne glass as if introducing an opening act. "She's the kind of person who makes a living judging others for not having a family, even though she can't seem to build one herself. Makes sense, though. People who can't create a home are always the first to tell others how to do it." The room froze around me. I heard the clinking of silverware come to an abrupt stop. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else turned away. I could feel the eyes of 20 people in the room locking onto me, including Vanessa's fiancé, a man named Kyle, who had never heard the part of my past I'd buried like a stone at the bottom of my heart. I didn't say anything. I was used to Vanessa's razor-sharp jabs, but this one cut deeper than I expected. Kyle stood up. His voice was eerily calm. "Emma," he said, looking directly at me, "I heard you're good at handling family matters. Tonight, you get to be the judge. Tell everyone what really happened 6 years ago." The room went silent as a funeral. Vanessa immediately gripped her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Kyle, what the hell are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the truth," he replied. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, every word slicing through the air. I looked up, locking eyes with Kyle. He knew. I didn't know how, but he knew. And with that one question, he'd ripped open the cover I'd spent years carefully building. Vanessa, my sister, the golden child adored by everyone, stood frozen, her usual confidence drained from her face. She wore a pale pink dress, hair perfectly curled, makeup flawlessly done. Everything was picture perfect, except for the truth, crashing down like a flood. I looked around the table. My parents were still seated, frozen. Mom clenched her napkin like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Dad avoided my gaze. He always did that when Vanessa crossed the line. Never said a word, never stepped in, just let things pass. "You don't have to say anything," Vanessa laughed dryly. "He's just confused. There wasn't anything special that happened 6 years ago." I set down my water glass. The soft clink echoed like an alarm bell. "Yes, there was," I said, my first words of the evening. Everyone turned toward me. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed. What I felt was a crack, like a wall splitting apart, ready to collapse. But I couldn't tell it all. Not yet. I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. "I don't think this is the right moment to bring up old wounds, but if everyone really wants to know, I'm ready to share everything, no more hiding." Kyle didn't respond, just gave a slow nod, one of understanding, as if he knew the truth didn't just need to come out, it needed to be faced. Vanessa forced a laugh, but panic flickered in her eyes. "Are you trying to make yourself the victim?" she snapped, her voice rising but shaky. "You always make everything so dramatic." "No, Vanessa," I replied, locking eyes with her. "I never wanted to be the victim. But I was the one who carried the consequences. I kept quiet to protect you, and maybe that was a mistake." No one said anything after that. They didn't have to. The real story, everything I had sacrificed for my sister, was still to come. But in that moment, when Kyle's gaze turned cold toward Vanessa, I knew the mask had begun to fall. Kept my eyes on Kyle's face. The same face that once held a gentle smile when he shook my hand at last year's Christmas party, back when he was still Vanessa's new boyfriend. Now, he looked at me like I held the key to something far bigger than he'd ever had the courage to ask. Vanessa took a step back, her lips pressed into a hard line, but Kyle stopped her with a single look. "Not now," she hissed. "Kyle, don't do this in front of everyone." "I've been trying not to all week," Kyle replied, "but if her sister won't speak up tonight, then I will." I stood, feeling each vertebra in my spine stretch tight. My heart pounded, but my voice came out steady. "What exactly do you know?" I asked, more direct than I expected. Kyle turned to face my parents, then scanned the room like he was calling out each pair of eyes locked onto him. He pulled out his phone and opened a PDF file. 4 days ago, I was at the district attorney's office when an old file was mistakenly printed to my tray. It was a scanned report from a 2017 child protection investigation. The listed temporary guardian was Emma Walker. My legs went weak. At first, I thought it was just someone with the same name, he continued, voice lower now. But then I saw the mother's name. The child's name, Isabelle May Turner. Vanessa froze. I didn't need to look to know she was fighting to suppress something screaming inside. Kyle stepped toward the dining table and set his phone down between two untouched wine glasses. Emma was listed as the emergency guardian of a 2-year-old girl. Her name was Isabelle. According to the report, the mother was suspected of drug use, living in unstable conditions, and had abandoned the child at a roadside motel near Eugene. The child was severely malnourished. No one breathed, no one moved. I looked at Kyle, and who do you think the mother was? He didn't hesitate. Vanessa. The gasp that came from my mother made me turn. She had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. But she didn't say anything. No one did. Not a soul in that perfectly curated living room dared utter a word. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. What gives you the right to dig into my life? Because I'm about to marry you, Kyle snapped, each word clipped. Because you haven't told me a single shred of truth in 2 whole years. I stepped forward toward the center of the room. My voice was low but clear. Vanessa had a child in 2017. No one in the family knew. She kept it from everyone, even our parents. When I got the call in the middle of the night, I thought my sister had been hurt. I didn't expect to find a trembling toddler clinging to her mother's torn sleeve in a filthy motel room that reeked of bleach and meth. A sob escaped from the corner. Maybe Aunt Susan? I stayed silent for 6 years because I thought I was protecting the family. I wanted Isabelle to grow up believing her mom might change. I took care of her for a while, until Vanessa came back, said she was ready to be a mother. I gave her back the child, hoping I'd been wrong to doubt my sister. But I turned to Kyle. If you found that file, then I'm guessing Isabelle wasn't cared for properly after she left my home. Kyle nodded, eyes heavy with regret. She was left with Vanessa's ex-boyfriend after they broke up. He kept her for a few months, then handed her over to Child Protective Services. Isabelle is now in the foster system. When I read that part, I couldn't pretend I didn't know anymore. Vanessa staggered like she was about to collapse. She reached toward our parents, a silent plea, like a child desperate for rescue. But this time, my father didn't stand. I sat back down, fingers tightly laced. I hadn't planned to say all this tonight. But Kyle had broken the silence, and now the truth was pouring out like a dam had burst. I remember that night vividly, a bitterly cold fall night in Eugene, Oregon, 6 years ago. I had just wrapped up an exhausting custody hearing and was driving back to my tiny apartment when my phone rang. Display, Vanessa, 2:14 a.m. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me I had to. Her voice came through in broken whispers, muffled by loud music and sobs. Emma, I need you. Motel Sunshine, room 151. Don't tell Mom and Dad. Then silence. I remember driving like I was on autopilot, gripping the steering wheel tightly, telling myself maybe she was just drunk, but deep down I knew. This wasn't a typical drunk call. When I knocked on room 151, the smell hit me like a wave. Cheap antiseptic, stale beer, and cigarettes. Vanessa stood at the doorway, her lips blue, one eye swollen, shoulder of her shirt torn. But it wasn't her appearance that froze me. It was the small child trembling on the bed. A little girl, tangled hair, wide dark eyes peeking out from under a filthy, thin blanket. Vanessa, I whispered, pointing at the girl. Who is that? Isabelle, she croaked. My daughter. I stood frozen. She had never once mentioned being pregnant. Never. I didn't know you had a baby. No one knows. Vanessa slumped to the floor, leaning against the bed. I was going to give her up, but I couldn't. Now I don't know what to do. I called 911 immediately. Isabelle was severely hypoglycemic, had an ear infection, and was dehydrated. The doctor said she hadn't even received her basic vaccinations. Vanessa tested positive for meth and alcohol. In that sterile hospital room, as the social worker discussed placing the baby in emergency foster care, I blurted out almost instinctively, "I'll take her. I'm her aunt. She needs family." 36 hours later, I brought Isabelle home to my apartment. Just me. No crib, no toys, just an old canvas bag with a few outfits that were too small for her frail frame. I functioned like a zombie. Worked by day, stayed up all night because Isabelle never slept through. She cried in her sleep, mumbling things like, "Don't lock me. Don't leave, Mummy." 3 months in, just as she began smiling again, I collapsed with sharp abdominal pain while making breakfast. Diagnosis: acute appendicitis with complications from abdominal infection. Emergency surgery. The doctor later broke the news gently. "I'm sorry, natural conception may not be possible anymore." I didn't cry. I just asked, "When can I care for the baby again?" They hesitated. "You're not the mother, you're just the aunt. Someone else will foster her while you recover." I protested. "No, I'll come home early. She needs me. She trusts me." Isabelle had finally begun to trust me, and I couldn't lose that. I left the hospital after 5 days, so weak I couldn't stand more than 10 minutes at a time. But the first night Isabelle returned to me, she clung to my neck and whispered. I dreamed Mommy went away forever, but I woke up and Aunt Jessie was still here. "I'll always be here," I whispered back. And I meant it. But I never expected that fragile peace to last only 8 months. One cloudy spring morning, Vanessa showed up at my door, hair dyed chestnut, floral dress, smiling sweetly with a stunning announcement. "I'm clean now, I'm in therapy, I live with my new boyfriend. He has a house, a car, and loves kids. I'm here to take my daughter." I stood, frozen. Isabelle was in the kitchen, coloring on the new whiteboard I had just bought. "You want to take her? After everything?" Vanessa nodded. "I'm her mother, and I'm ready." I looked toward Isabelle, and I knew if she left, something in me would break forever. But I wasn't her mother. I had no legal rights. Not then. I had to let go. I still remember that morning in Seattle. The light rain falling, like the universe trying to warn me that something was slipping away again. Vanessa showed up with her new boyfriend, Brent, a slick-talking man who kept calling Isabelle his little princess, even as she glanced at him with guarded eyes. I had wrestled with myself for 2 weeks, calling lawyers, asking if I had any right to keep Isabelle. The answer was always the same. "Emma, you're not the biological mother. If Vanessa meets the reunification conditions, the court will favor her." I had prepared for everything except one: Vanessa playing by the rules. She came armed with certificates of completed rehab, psychological counseling summaries, a reference letter from a pastor, and even a handwritten note from Brent promising to raise Isabelle as his own. I wrote a 7-page letter to the judge explaining Isabelle's fragile emotional state, her nightmares, her fear of strangers, how she'd finally started sleeping through the night in my home. I attached a report from her pediatric counselor. But none of it mattered. After a hearing that lasted less than an hour, Vanessa was granted custody. I had to pack Isabelle's things and force a smile when she asked, "Will I come back to you, Auntie?" "Of course," I said, swallowing hard. "I'll always be here." I knew it was a lie. Vanessa moved to Tacoma, over 2 hours away. At first, she sent photos. Isabelle at the park, coloring, wearing a floral headband. She looked okay. I called, texted, tried to stay in touch. In the early weeks, Vanessa still responded. "Isabelle's fine," she said. "You worry too much." I didn't blame her. Not yet. But then the messages grew sparse. The photos stopped. My calls went unanswered. I sent care packages, books, toys, birthday cards. No one replied. By the third month, when Brent answered and said Vanessa changed her number, stopped bothering us, I knew I had really lost the little girl. I clung to hope by calling Isabelle's school. They confirmed she was enrolled, but a few months later, they said she'd been withdrawn after the last term. She was gone. I had no legal standing, no blood relation. I was just a name in the past, even though I'd once held her every night, changed every diaper, calmed every nightmare. I thought the worst day was when Vanessa came to take Isabelle. I was wrong. The worst came 6 years later at my own engagement party, when Kyle pulled me aside. Isabelle entered the foster system, he said. Brent called Child Protective Services after Vanessa disappeared without a word. Since he's not her biological father, he couldn't keep her. She's gone through 4 placements in 3 years. I froze. The air felt like ice. 3 years? I whispered. And no one told me? Kyle shook his head. You weren't legally listed as a former guardian. There's no paper trail. No one knew to contact you. I couldn't speak. I had let her slip away again. The first time because I believed in change. The second because I didn't fight hard enough. I lifted my wine glass, but couldn't drink. My hand trembled so badly I had to put it down. Vanessa stood across the room, arms wrapped tightly around herself, lips pressed thin. She didn't say a word to defend herself. I turned to Kyle, my voice low. Where is Isabelle now? His eyes softened. She's with a foster family named Eleanor Reed, outside Portland. They say she's bright, but has trouble trusting adults. I nodded, balling my hands into fists. There was nothing left to wait for. I was going to find Isabelle, and this time I would not leave, not for anything. 3 days after the engagement party, I received a strange message from Marcus. Emma, I need to talk. It's about Isabelle. I didn't reply right away, still reeling from everything that had happened. I wasn't naive enough to believe Marcus, the fiancé of the woman who took my daughter, had suddenly decided to take my side. But then the second message came, with a PDF file attached, just 2 words. Read this. I opened it. A report from Washington State Child Protective Services. Isabelle's name was right at the top. But what made my breath catch wasn't the words foster placement. It was the note at the bottom. Reporter Marcus Henley, fiancé of Vanessa Miller. I called him immediately. He answered after 2 rings. His voice was drained, dry. I didn't know. I honestly didn't know she had abandoned the girl. I said nothing. She told me Isabelle was living with her sister, a relative in Idaho. I stumbled across the report while helping a coworker with a background check on guardians. When I saw her name, I almost didn't believe it. He paused, then continued. You were once her legal guardian, right? I raised her from the moment Vanessa, collapsed from her addiction. Marcus lowered his voice. Then you should fight for her. Do you have proof? I swallowed. I have everything. Hospital bills, preschool records, photos, therapy documents, even a video of the first time Isabelle called me Mom. He sighed. I have a friend who works in family court. If you want, I can connect you. I hesitated. Why are you helping me? He paused, then said gently, because Isabelle doesn't deserve this, and I don't want to marry someone who could abandon her child like that. We met at a small cafe near the King County Family Court. He brought 2 thick files in sealed envelopes. One was a complete copy of the state's investigation report, and the other listed the addresses of every foster family Isabelle had stayed with. When I opened the folder, a photo slipped out. Isabelle, hair tangled, knees pulled to her chest in the corner of a playground. Her eyes stared straight at the camera, but her face was hauntingly blank. My hands trembled. Marcus slid a cup of coffee toward me. You need to stay calm. Every step from now on has to be strategic. I nodded. I'm going to hire a lawyer. I already compiled a short list of 3. All specialize in reinstatement of guardianship. I didn't ask how he knew so much. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was conscience. Whatever the reason, I knew I couldn't waste this chance. 2 weeks later, I officially filed a petition with family court to reopen the case and request guardianship of Isabelle. In my file, I included not just evidence of my prior care, but also a recent psychological evaluation showing I was fully stable, financially, emotionally, and in terms of my living environment. Marcus agreed to testify. He spoke openly about Vanessa hiding Isabelle's whereabouts, her refusal to take her back after Brent's report, and even the moment she said, "I'm too tired of this burden." I sat beside my attorney, listening to every word he said to the judge, each one cutting deep, yet oddly comforting. Because this time I wasn't fighting alone, and this time the law was on my side. At the end of the hearing, the judge ordered a temporary suspension of Vanessa's visitation rights and launched a formal investigation. Child Protective Services was instructed to arrange a supervised meeting between me and Isabelle within 7 days. I walked out of court with cold hands, but clear eyes. My journey to bring Isabelle home had finally, truly begun. I stepped into the second hearing no longer as an aunt pleading to raise her niece, but as a mother demanding justice for her daughter. That courtroom was packed that morning. Rachel, sat across the aisle, her face carefully made up, though her eyes darted constantly. She wore a beige cashmere coat, trying hard to look the part of a devoted mother, but it felt like a cheap performance. Marcus didn't sit next to her. He chose to stand on my side in the witness section. Judge Anderson, a man in his 60s with short silver hair, entered and called the formal arguments to order. My attorney, Cynthia Mallory, began with a comprehensive summary, from Isabelle's caregiving history, school records, and therapy notes to every expense receipt over the 3 years I'd raised her. Every dollar was accounted for. Formula, preschool tuition, physical therapy, even diapers and a toddler bed. "Your Honor," Cynthia said in a calm, firm voice, "my client raised Isabelle as a true mother since the child was just 14 months old. During that time, Ms. Vanessa Miller made no contact, offered no support. After rehab, she filed for custody, promising stability. What followed was abandonment." She then submitted a second folder, detailed records of the government aid Rachel had received under the pretense of raising a child. For 18 months, she collected over $28,000 from the Single Parent Assistance Program. There is no evidence any of it was used for Isabelle. Rachel sniffled and tried to rise in protest, but her lawyer quickly pulled her back down. Cynthia pressed on. In contrast, her bank statements show purchases like jewelry, spa treatments, cosmetic clinics, and hotel stays at Riverbend Resort. There is also no documentation of her placing the child into foster care. Marcus was the first witness. He stood with calm resolve. Vanessa told me Isabelle was living with her sister, a school teacher in Idaho. She never once mentioned foster care. When I discovered the truth through an internal report, I asked her for an explanation. Instead of clarifying, she told me I didn't understand the pressure of being a single mother and ended the conversation. That's when I knew I couldn't trust her. Next came Brent, the case supervisor from the foster center where Isabelle had stayed for 3 months. The child arrived sleep-deprived, afraid of strangers, and woke up frequently at night crying for her mom. But when we brought up Emma, the woman she called Mom, her tone changed completely. She spoke of story time, zoo trips, and strawberry pancakes on Sundays. With Emma, she felt safe. When it was my turn, Cynthia asked me to recount my time raising Isabelle. I didn't cry. I laid it out, step by step, from the day I brought her home, how I worked part-time just to pick her up every afternoon, how I learned to braid her hair, soothe her rashes, and that first night she whispered, "Mommy," through trembling lips. I didn't mention my infertility. I didn't need pity. I just told the truth. When Rachel's lawyer tried to argue that I only kept the child out of guilt, Cynthia countered immediately. "Oh, then why did the biological mother walk away while the so-called cold-hearted sister raised her?" Toward the end, the judge asked Rachel to respond directly. He asked if she admitted to not reporting Isabelle's whereabouts accurately. Rachel said, I I didn't know what to do. I thought someone would help. I was struggling too. Her voice faltered. The judge didn't change expression. And what about the aid money? Rachel said nothing. He banged the gavel. The court will review all financial records and recommends a full audit of the benefit disbursement. Then he turned to me. Miss Emma, given your long-term care, stability, and documented history, I grant you unsupervised visitation starting next week. The next hearing will determine permanent custody. I turned to Marcus. He nodded, eyes softening. Rachel turned her face away. I knew the fight wasn't over, but I had reclaimed a piece of my daughter's heart. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone, blood or not, break it again. 3 weeks after the first hearing, the Montgomery County Court issued its final ruling. That morning, I arrived at the courthouse early. Emma Miller, 35 years old, a family court judge once mocked as someone who doesn't know how to love, was now sitting as a legal mother awaiting the fate of her daughter. Marcus came with me, not saying much, just squeezing my hand tightly before we entered the courtroom. Isabelle, fondly called Izzy, wasn't present. She was at preschool, unaware that today's decision would completely change her life. Rachel arrived late, still neat and put together as always, but her eyes were tired and her fingers kept clawing at her sleeves, a nervous habit. She sat in silence, no smug smirks or sharp retorts this time. Perhaps Rachel understood. This was no longer a stage for performance. Judge Anderson entered, holding a thin file. No one said a word. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at me and Rachel. After reviewing all the evidence, hearing witness testimonies, and assessing the stability of the caregiving environments, the court has reached the following decision. The entire room held its breath. The court grants Emma Miller, the plaintiff, full legal and physical custody of Isabelle Miller, born April 13th, 2019. I could hear my own heartbeat in my chest. My vision blurred for a moment. Marcus gave my hand a gentle squeeze. He didn't have to say anything. I knew I had just crossed a painful but righteous milestone. The judge wasn't finished. As for the defendant, Ms. Vanessa Rachel Miller, the court acknowledges her misuse of child support funds, failure to properly notify child welfare services, and abandonment of a minor within the foster care system. Rachel lowered her head, lips tightly pressed. The court orders the defendant to repay $16,200 within 6 months in monthly installments of $3,000. Additionally, visitation rights are restricted to supervised sessions at a designated facility no more than twice per month. I turned to look at Rachel. She didn't cry, she simply stood after the ruling, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, cold and final, much like the choices she had once forced upon her daughter. That afternoon, I picked Izzy up from school early. She ran toward me, her pink backpack bouncing, hair in uneven pigtails, holding a crayon drawing of a cat wearing a crown. "Mommy, I made this for you." I hugged her tightly. For the first time in months, my heart didn't feel uncertain or fragile. We went home. Marcus had dinner ready. He wasn't Izzy's biological father, but he treated her with a love that was full and real. That night's dinner wasn't extravagant, just mac and cheese, Izzy's favorite, a small chocolate cake, and one single candle in the middle. "Why is there a candle, Mommy?" she asked, looking up. I smiled. "Today is your freedom birthday. From now on, you officially have a mom and a safe home." She didn't fully understand, but the sparkle in her eyes said everything. She blew out the candle, clapped, and hugged me tightly. That night, after I tucked her into bed, I stepped out to the back porch and watched the porch lights slowly flick on throughout the neighborhood. Marcus brought me a cup of ginger tea. "You doing okay?" he asked. I nodded and leaned on his shoulder. There were times I wondered, if I couldn't have children, did I still deserve to be a mother? But Izzy, she never asked if I was her birth mom or not. She just needed someone to be there. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "Well, you became exactly that." I closed my eyes, letting the night breeze brush my cheek. Somewhere out there, Rachel might be stewing in anger, plotting revenge, or simply running from the truth. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had stood firm, not because I was a judge, not because of my degrees, but because of the love I had for a child. A love that didn't need a birth certificate to be real. And this time, I would protect my daughter, no matter what. 3 months after the trial ended, fall arrived, bringing with it a kind of calm I hadn't experienced in years. Isabelle, now officially bearing my last name, Miller, started her new pre-K class at Birchwood Elementary, just a few blocks from our home. She quickly bonded with a curly-haired girl named Ivy and began coming home each afternoon with stories about Ms. Carroll, the nice teacher who doesn't like loud noises. I took a 6-week leave from the court to fully focus on rebuilding our life together. Every morning, I walked Izzy to school, then strolled through Rosedale Park, where squirrels darted through crimson trees. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I no longer lived in defense mode that I realized how beautiful Minneapolis could be in the fall. Marcus remained unchanged. He still patiently kept the house tidy, learned to bake soft banana bread without burning the bottom, and read bedtime stories to Izzy every Wednesday night, because that was backup dad day. One morning, after breakfast, Izzy suddenly asked, "Mommy, can I be a lawyer like Miss Cynthia when I grow up?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "Why do you ask that?" "Because she doesn't yell, she doesn't cry, but everyone listens to her. Like when I want Ivy to stop stealing my crayons, I have to use logic." Marcus laughed, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. This little girl who used to panic at the sound of a doorbell could now recognize her emotions, reason things through, and even name what she was feeling. Not because I was a perfect mom, but because, finally, she had a place where someone truly listened. At the end of November, my parents flew in from San Diego. I hadn't planned to let them meet Izzy so soon, but Marcus had quietly said, "They're trying. You don't have to forgive them. Just crack the door open a little." My parents, Frank and Joanne, had strongly opposed my decision to adopt Izzy. My mother once said, "You should focus on your career. You've done enough. Don't turn your life into someone else's cleanup mission." I knew she didn't mean to be cruel. She just never understood what it's like to be a woman who can't have children. Yet here's a little voice call her mom with no strings attached. Our first meeting took place stiffly at Central Grove Park. Izzy sat between two strangers she only knew from picture frames on the bookshelf, but innocence has a way of melting ice. "Grandpa, your hair is white like Santa Claus." My dad burst out laughing while my mom flushed slightly. Izzy pulled a one-armed doll from her backpack and told an elaborate story about saving it with Band-Aids. My mom listened intently and pulled out a tiny floral dress she'd sewn, saying, "For the doctor doll." That evening, I saw my dad quietly slip a photo of Izzy into his wallet. And my mom, the same woman who had once resisted everything, crouched to buckle Izzy's shoes, her eyes misty, without saying a word. We started calling ourselves a family sewn back together with real thread. No one pretended the tears never happened, but every small action, Grandpa fixing the patio for Izzy's play area, Grandma learning to make egg-free ravioli, was like a careful stitch, closing up what once was broken. As for Rachel, I never reached out again. The court had ordered her to complete behavioral and financial counseling before she could even request supervised visits. Last I heard, she'd moved out of state and cut off most of her connections. I didn't resent her, but I also wasn't waiting for her to change. Because I no longer needed a sister. What I needed was to be a steady mother to a child who is growing stronger every day in love and safety. For that first Christmas, with all 3 generations of the Miller family gathered around a tree Marcus had assembled himself, Izzy set a chocolate cookie on the table by the fireplace. "For Santa," she whispered, "and I left another one for Grandpa because he fixed our fence." I stood still. In that moment, I knew I was no longer the woman heartbroken by infertility, or the sister dismissed by her family, or the stoic judge. I was a mother. And I had rebuilt a family. Out of scraps, out of struggle, out of love that needed no certificate. And if Izzy ever asks me one day, why did you choose me? I won't say it was out of pity or duty. I'll say, because I met you, and I just knew. We were already a family. Emma's story reminds us that family isn't always about blood. It's about love, acceptance, and real sacrifice. Despite being betrayed, hurt, and misunderstood, she chose to heal through unwavering strength and unconditional love for Lily. Justice, truth, and kindness ultimately built a new home, one where no one is perfect, but everyone tries for each other. The biggest lesson? Family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's something you choose and protect with your heart. What are your thoughts on Emma and Lily's journey? What would you do in their situation? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more touching and meaningful family stories.